Hey guys, what is going on? This is Coobs from OneCast Gaming, and today I have a very special guest with me. Some of you may know him as MalfusX, one of the best shoutcasters, basically doing the Solomid Series. How are you doing today, Malfus?
I'm great, man. How are you?
Not too bad. So why don't
Thanks so
you?
much for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. So basically, for people that don't know who you are, why don't you give them a quick intro to you?
Um, I am, I don't know, just a pretty average American kid. I live in Mexico now, playing in an orchestra down here, and we got really into League of Legends a couple of years ago. About 2.5 years ago, I started playing now, and I kind of reached about the limit of where I'm mechanically and technically able to be as a player, and I realized that I wanted to be more involved, particularly with the esports side of things somehow, and I needed to find a way to do that. And I realized that I had kind of a knack for casting, and just started practicing and working, and yeah, kind of just went from there.
All right, so how did you get into casting? Did you start with small tournaments? How did you really get your name out there?
I decided that I wanted to do shoutcasting. I decided that was something that I wanted to be involved with, and so I just was like, okay, who needs shoutcasters? Well, small time tournaments need shoutcasters, and so I went onto the competitive League of Legends forum on LeagueofLegends.com and just went to the competitive side and emailed every tournament organizer asking if they already had coverage lined up, if they needed someone who could stream, if they needed someone who could cast. That was actually how I initially met you so many months ago, and also Sia Steve over at Zeke.tv, and several other people that have been really helpful along the way.
And so then how did you get your big break? For those of you who don't know, Malthus does cast the solo mid series. How did that come to be? How did that come together for you?
That was a bit of a weird story. One of my in-game friends was real life friends with a rioter, actually Steve Jaws, Riot Jaws, who is the collegiate coordinator for League of Legends, and so he works a lot with collegiate organizations, people who are trying to start up clubs at their school and stuff like that. But he was also very much involved with Ivy Law, the Ivy League of Legends, which is a collegiate-based tournament. It's kind of similar to CSL, is another one that's getting up in some popularity right now. Mostly, I think, well, not mostly, but partially because of their sponsorship with the Zubu. But so he knew of me through that mutual friend, and my friend recommended me to cast the finals for season 2 of Ivy Law, I believe it was. And so I talked with Steve Jaws, and he was like, okay, cool, and cast that with another caster named Danya Harold. And that was right at the time when the TSM North American Invitational #1 was about to happen, and Dan Den was looking for casters, and Danya Harold actually put in an application. Like he went through the Reddit thread and sent the recording of us doing the Ivy Law cast and said, "Hey, I'd really be interested in applying. What do you think?" And Dan Den apparently actually mistook my voice on the recording for his, and so he said, "Oh, okay, that'd be great. Yeah, we'd love to have you." And and then when he got in the Skype call with him and realized his mistake, he was like, "Okay, well, we'd still love to have you audition too, but who's this other guy? How can we get in touch with him?" And so they called me up on Skype, and yeah, that was the beginning.
So that's a great story for people out there who maybe want to get into casting and stuff like that. So you've obviously seen some high level, teams and players. What are your thoughts on the season 3 changes so far?
I mean, I think that they're still in that settling in phase. I think that they're going to have a lot of numbers that they need to tweak, a lot of mechanics that they looked at and thought, hey, this will be really cool. And then now we're maybe looking at, of course, right now I'm mostly speaking about Black Cleaver. They were like, okay, this will be a really cool item, something that gives all these stats that AD casters really want. And then they just completely overdid it and made the thing way too strong. But I think after, a couple of months of settling in and people really figuring out what's strong, what's maybe a little bit less strong, and what works really well and what kind of setups, setups. That's what I wanted to say. I think it's going to be a very fresh game, and I think that's really important. The item game has felt really stale. There's essentially been 1, 2, maybe 3 builds for each role at most, and it's a much more diverse world out there right now, and that's something that we really needed. So I'm looking forward to seeing where we go once we actually hit season 3 proper.
And one of the questions that I think a lot of people are wanting to know is, with all the games you've casted, is there one moment that sticks out to you? Is there one specific moment or one game maybe that you always kind of remember?
Hmm. That's a tough one. There have been some. Yeah, you're. I mean, I don't know. They all tend to kind of blend together, especially when you're doing stuff like the Solomid series where you're casting for 5 6 hours, and then the next day you cast for a whole bunch more time. I remember one of the Solomid series, I don't think it was last week, I think it was the week before, we were getting into like a really, really good series between TSM and CLG Prime. And it was just like, I remember like, I was starting to get really, really excited and into it. Wombat was starting to get way into it, and he's normally a very, very reserved caster. Like he's got a great style, he's got so much personality and all that, but he keeps his I don't, maybe his excitement level to not to a minimum, but he keeps it in check. I'll just say that because he's not a big fan of the like super screamy, no control style of casting where people are just like yelling into the mic all the time. He really really has some disdain for that. So he very much keeps himself in control all the time. And even he was starting to like you could tell his excitement level was starting to rise up. And then unfortunately the whole series just got DDoSed. And it was like the TSM ended up having to forfeit, and I was so furious and angry about it. That's a weird memory to stick out, but when when I try to recollect just one series or just one game, that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
And I'm sure a lot of you remember that match not too long ago. One last thing as far as casting goes before we move on. What would you describe yourself? Like, what style of caster? Are you more of a play-by-play? Are you more of a analyst? How would you describe yourself as a caster?
Well, I'm in kind of an interesting situation because I started off mostly working with the play-by-play side of things, and then the Solomid series went to this different casting model where because Wombat has become so incredibly popular with our viewers, they just wanted him to be streaming and casting all the time. There are other logistical purposes for it, like they don't want the stream to have to come down and back up whenever we change streamers and stuff like that because we tend to lose a lot of viewers during those periods of downtime. So because of that, and because Wombat is almost purely a play-by-play caster, I've had to work on my color commentary side a bit. So it's been an interesting thing. I would say I'm pretty flexible, but I do feel a little bit more at home when I'm doing play-by-play.
So you still prefer the play-by-play as opposed to being an analyst?
It's just that's my natural inclination is to go in on stuff like that. Like I have to be very very careful not to jump in on team fights or stuff like that whenever I'm casting Wombat. And it's something I have to be constantly conscious of.
Now, one thing you do that I'm sure a lot of the community knows of are your community drafts. So why don't you tell the people about your community drafts?
Well, it was initially started as a way to practice casting and to work with the spectator mode, which was still relatively fresh at the time. Sia, Steve, and I were like, okay, we're gonna do the Zeke weekly this weekend. We should probably find a way to actually cast together to practice to work on our chemistry stuff like that. And so we were like, okay, let's just go into the customs and see what games we can hop in and spectate. And it was like, okay, there's a bunch of ARAMs and not a whole lot else. It's like, all right, why don't we just create a game? Call it 5v5 draft casted, and then we'll just get people to hop in who want to hear their play shoutcasted, and that's how we'll work on it, stuff like that. And we had so much fun doing it the first night. We were like, all right, we're gonna just keep doing that, and we came up with a name so that we could make like a Reddit post and stuff like that about it. Community Drafts was the name that we settled on, and it really has become more about the community and less about the actual games itself. We've made a number of some pretty cool friends, and then there's a couple trolls that stick around, but there's a little bit of love for them too, just a little bit.
Last question then. What are your future plans for casting?
I mean, it's kind of a scary future out there for casters right now in League of Legends for the kind of like I don't want to say like side tournaments, but the basically the non-mainstream sides. Just because with Riot is moving to kind of centralize everything with Season 3 with the Championship Series, players are going to be on contract and stuff like that, and it's going to mean less availability. Oh, I'm having a really hard time talking tonight. It's going to mean less availability for tournaments like the Solomid Series for the very, very top players. So that's actually kind of a scary position to be put in as a shoutcaster who's primarily working in these kinds of events. I don't exactly know what the future of shoutcasting for me is going to be, but the esports scene as a whole, not just League of Legends, but with every major esports title, has become something that's really really captured my imagination, and so I don't think I'll be vacating that realm anytime soon.
All right, so do you have any shout outs, anything where people can follow you, watch you, anything like that?
Yeah, you can follow me. I'm at MalfusX on Twitter, facebook.com/MalfusX, or twitch.tv/MalfusX. That's where you can find all my stuff. That Twitch channel is where we do community drafts. They're Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, whenever there's availability and no technical issues and stuff like that, which seem to be coming more and more frequently. As far as shout-outs, shout out to all the admins over at the Solomid series that have been so very, very kind to me and helped me out. Also to the other casters there, Studio, Digitwombat, and Kobe24. Shout out to Sia Steve, because he's my boy. And a big thank you to you for having me on for this interview.
You're very welcome, ladies and gentlemen. That was MalfusX, streamer and caster. This is Coobs from OneCast Gaming, signing off until next time.